morning, but I truly appreciate the opportunity to spend this time with you. We have 90 minutes, so I want to start right on time and make the best of all of that time. I'll just give you a quick overview. About what we'll be doing. So this is a town hall here in Waterbury where I want to provide you with about 20 minutes of updates of my work and then leave the rest of the time to answer your questions. I know you all have a lot of questions and I really want to provide you with as many answers as I have. I would like for everybody to be reminded that this is a town hall and there's an expectation that people will be respectful of all voices. This event is being recorded and it will be shared out later, but you are welcome to record, take pictures, whatever. I don't host meetings where you have to put your phone away. We want to make sure that this is a safe and orderly meeting. We're operating in very different times right now. So it's really difficult for me because I'm someone who generally moves about the room, but I am going to speak from the front today. I'm not going to move about the room. I ask people to, if you want to ask a question so that we don't have a queue forming, just to write your name. If you want to ask the question yourself or you want me to read it, you just let me know. But I ask that if you're the one asking your question that you speak up. I will also say that anyone who causes a disruption at this meeting will be removed. We can disagree, but we will not be disagreeable, and I will not be disrespectful or put my safety at risk. So I want people to be able to speak candidly and freely. I want you to be able to ask questions of me as your representative, but I also want you to be respectful of other people's questions. If there's anyone who has a question that requires more time, I have staff throughout the room that will schedule a meeting for you or a phone call. So as not to take up all the time from other people. So I'm going to go through, any questions about that right now? I'm going to go through just some things about Waterbury specifically because we are in Waterbury and I haven't had an in-person town hall here. I think sometimes you assume that people know what you've done. So today I'm going to go over many of the things that I've done specifically for the city of Waterbury, and then, like I said, leave time for us to have a conversation. I'm trying to get my clock up so that I can keep track of time because there's no clock here. Okay. So since being elected to Congress, I've had 11 bills signed into law under 2 different administrations. I've had bills signed for veterans, my Palomares Veterans Act and the Mental Health VA Staffing Act were both signed into law. I had the Veterans Health Care and Benefits Improvement Act signed into law. I mention this because it's really difficult to have bills signed in your first term in Congress, and I got not 1 but 3 veterans bills signed into law. During the baby formula crisis in 2022, I had the Baby Formula Act signed into law, which helped to get much needed baby formula to babies in need. I also had the STEM Learning Opportunities Act signed into law as part of the CHIPS and Science Act, and that invests more money into STEM opportunities for students. Since I've been in Congress, I've had not 1 but 2 wild and scenic designations signed into law, which is a really important deal. I had 41 miles of river protected on the Farmington River and 40 miles on the Housatonic River. So it generally takes years to have a wild and scenic designation set aside, but I've done that twice in this district. As part of the American Rescue Plan, my legislation, the State Education Jobs Act, was signed into law, and that was to make sure that when school districts had to make tough choices coming out of the pandemic, that nurses, social workers, therapists, all of those support staff that help students would not be the first to be be let go. The Pell Grant Restoration Act was my legislation that was also signed into law, and that was in 2021. And finally, a very, very Waterbury piece of legislation was the Help Find the Missing Act. I know many of you remember Billy Smolinski, who disappeared in the city of Waterbury. I met with his mother, and she raised her concerns about how federal databases were not sharing information, and it took longer to identify her son. I introduced that legislation, and it was passed and signed into law. So now federal databases are sharing missing persons information. This legislation was signed under both the legislation that I just mentioned. All 11 pieces of legislation were signed under the Biden and Trump administration, and my Baby Formula Act was signed with overwhelming support, almost 414 to 4 in the House of Representatives. So when someone says, what has Shahana Hayes done? To start, she's passed 11 pieces of legislation during my time in Congress. I also passed the Clean School Bus Act, which provided for $5 billion to be invested in purchasing clean school buses. Many of those came back to this district. We've written about 28 buses. Many districts around the country also got clean school buses. I worked with Brenda Mallory, and we were able to secure $5 billion in federal funding in order to do this program. So that's the legislation that I've done. As far as casework, one of the first things I did when I took office was I moved the congressional office here to Waterbury. I wanted it right downtown. I wanted it where it would be easily accessible to people, because this city has the most number of my constituents, and it's centrally located, so the congressional office should be here. Since moving the office here, we've closed over 967 cases and brought back close to $2 million to constituents. That's either through VA benefits, IRS, Social Security, but we brought all of that money back here. And what we saw is that because we are so centrally located, more people were accessing the congressional office. You should also know that we work with the Waterbury Public Schools to promote Service Academy. One of the things that I couldn't understand when I took office was why Waterbury students were not applying to our military service academies. That's West Point, the Merchant Marines, the Coast Guard Academy. We don't need a congressional recommendation for the Coast Guard Academy, but the other academies, and it was because they didn't know. So I have a veteran caseworker, and he works with Susan Traywick. They go into the Waterbury Public Schools all year round to let kids know that this opportunity is available to them. I've also had interns right here from Waterbury working in my Waterbury office. And I have, well, my husband has, he works with CBC Spouses, and through the CBC Scholarship Foundation, I have given out more than $150,000 in scholarships to deserving young people all over the state, because I am the only congressperson from the Congressional Black Caucus in Connecticut, and many Waterbury students have benefited from that. You can clap for that. Waterbury has received close to $90 million in 71 federal awards that I have helped to spearhead since my time in office. And I'll go through these really quickly because I want to make sure that we stay on time. But Staywell Health Center, almost $20 million. Waterbury Housing Authority, $10 million. Waterbury Health 360, money for suicide prevention and wraparound services. Over millions of dollars for brownfield remediation. Almost $53 million, literally all of these brownfields that you see. I have made the case for Waterbury every single time. Brought back money for the Hamilton Park Pool, the Washington Park Pool, the George Toronto Park, renovating the fire station on Walnut Street, Martin Luther King Park. All of these things have been things that I have spearheaded on behalf of the people of the city of Waterbury. I know as I was walking in, I saw people from other parts of the district. Don't worry, I do lots of things throughout the district, but this is a Waterbury event. And what I've learned is that in my effort to not brag, I failed to inform people. So people really don't appreciate all of the things that have come back to the city as a result of the efforts that I've put forth. And then finally, a couple years ago, Congress bought back community project funding, where a member can specifically direct funds, where I can ask for a project in my district where I'd like for federal funds to go. So not as part of a larger package, but very specific. Just last Friday, I was able to secure $175,000 for Waterbury Pell. That's the second such grant that Pell has gotten specifically from me. A couple years ago, I got him $170,000 to continue $4 million for the Fulton Park pool. It was very important to me that the pool in the north end also be renovated, and I submitted that and was able to work with the administration to get that work done. And just this summer, we cut the ribbon on that pool. That was me. With COVID hit, outside of fighting for SNAP benefits and to make sure that education funds were separate, because I understand when municipalities have huge budgets that they have to work with, sometimes education falls to the wayside. So if you remember, the education budget was separate than the regular budget in COVID. That was something that I pushed for. But I also secured $2.2 million for the city of Waterbury through community project funding to purchase Chromebooks for all of our students, because what I noticed that in this district, the equity gaps could not be larger. I've said over and over that I represent more exclusive boarding schools than any other member of Congress. I also represent some of the lowest performing Title I schools in the country, and the gaps could not be larger. I have towns that have 3, 4, 5 boarding schools in one town, and 5 miles down the road, public schools that are struggling. So I have always fought for public schools during my time in Congress and even before. Waterbury over $2 million to begin to purchase Chromebooks for all of our students. And like I said, make sure, literally through all of our education funding, that kids have every opportunity that is in front of them so that they can realize the potential in their dreams. In 2024, I got $100,000 for a pop-up food pantry at the North End Rec Center. I forgot the name of it. But I got money for North End Rec Center to have this pop-up food pantry. And then finally, after the Fulton Park pool, I was able to secure the funds for the Hamilton Park streetscape and walkway that went around that pool. So I have not forgotten about Waterbury. And like I said, when I got elected, I wanted to be the congresswoman that I needed for someone to be for me when I was growing up. And that means making sure that no matter what community you are in the city, that they're not left behind. So you will see that the projects that I have fought for, the things that I have championed, are to reach the most people and the least of us. The people who otherwise would be left behind and not have anyone speaking up for them in Congress. So I'm very proud of that record, very proud of the things that I've done, very proud that people can walk right into my office and bring a problem and we begin to work on it. And it doesn't mean that I always have the answer. It doesn't mean that we'll always be able to figure it out, but we'll do everything we can to make sure we try. And finally, before we close, I want to just make sure people understand. As a civics teacher, you kind of take for granted that everybody just knows what you do. And what I've learned in this role is that not everybody knows what I do. I represent not only Waterbury, I have 41 towns across Connecticut. If you divided the state into 4 parts, the entire northwest corner is me. From the Farmington Valley, Simsbury, Avon, Canton, down to New Britain, over to Meriden, Waterbury, Danbury, all the way to the New York border. So this is a huge district that I have to get all the way around the district. So it's very different than your local electeds. I cover 41 cities and towns. Also, my other office is not in Hartford, it's in Washington, D.C. So every week I fly to Washington, D.C., and I'm there either Monday to Thursday or Tuesday to Friday. So when I'm not here in the city, I am in Washington fighting for our voice at the federal level. And when people call my office, oftentimes people ask me about local things, potholes, street lights, the Board of Education. And while that's not me, I always try to connect people with the appropriate person. But what I'm learning is that not many people have a full grasp of federalism, of what my role is in this conversation. My role is to make sure that you are represented at the federal level. We have a governor and a state legislator to make sure that you are represented at the state level. We have a mayor and a board of aldermen to make sure you are represented at the local level. But my role is at the federal level to make sure that we get all of the funding that we're supposed to get, because Congress writes the check and funds the government. To make sure that our laws are reflective of the people that I represent, and to make sure that there is oversight of the activities of our government. That's my role. That's my role. So, again, I look forward to taking your questions and speaking to you today, and hopefully I can provide you with some insight. So that being said, I have some cards here where people wrote that they wanted to ask a question, so I'll ask if you want me to read the question, or if you want to read it, or if you want to ask your question out loud, and then we'll take it from there. And if someone decides that throughout this that you didn't have a question before, but you want to ask a question now, just raise your hand and I'll have one of my staffers bring you a note card and write your name on it. Okay? Okay. And these are in random order, except for this first one, who was the very first attendee to show up at 10:10 a.m. So feels like we should get a question. Allison? Can you stand?
Oh, sure. God, I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous.
I've never been to a town hall before. This is my first one. And I know a lot of what you've done. I've checked your congressional record. I think you're very heavy on VA and education, which I appreciate. My dad was a World War II and Korean War vet. And both my sons are teachers. They don't have jobs yet, but one of my sons was a sub-year doctor out of probation. So, there are nights, literally, where I can't sleep at night. I think of everything that's going on in our country right now. And I know the Democrats are not in the majority and they're limited as to what can be done. But what sort of is being done on a broad sense? I get the sense that, I sit here and I say, what can I do? I'm just one person. And then I don't know. I mean, I've contacted Chris Murphy's office, and you get a response. It's a pretty canned response, right? I've contacted Richard Blumenthal's office, and I've never gotten a response. And with you, it was great. I don't know your aide Dan. He's great. He actually called me back and let me know that this was happening today, so I really appreciate that. But what really can Democrats do in Congress now? What's the plan of attack if that's not too hard to work?
Well, thank you. That is a very general question, so I'll try to narrow in on a couple of things. Like you can imagine, there are many nights that I can't sleep at night. I lean on my faith, I stay prayed up, but I also am resolute, and now is not the time to concede. We have to lean in. I appreciate you shouting out my staff, and I'll say to you, that starts at the top, because I have staffers in the room, and everyone who works for me knows that everybody gets a call back. That if someone has an issue and it's not us, then we find out who it is and we connect them directly with that person. It's something that I am very intentional about, because I'm not a person who ever called my congressperson, but I didn't even know to call my congressperson for many of the things that I needed help with. So not only do I want people to know that we're there, I want them to expect that they will get a response. What can Democrats do? I feel like we are back in this place where I have to remind people that elections have consequences. And many of the things that we talked about in the last cycle are happening at warp speed right now. Democrats can't call things to the floor. We don't have the power of the calendar that rests with the Speaker of the House, which is why the Speaker that is chosen is very important. But we have, for the first time in I think 30 years, forced votes using discharge petitions 5 different times. When the Republicans refused to call the Affordable Care Act subsidies up for a vote, we forced it with the discharge petition. When we, at the end of last year, not 25, the end of 24, right, as Biden was legal, we forced a vote on WEC GPO for teacher retirement and pensions. We've done this over, we forced a vote on the Epstein files. So we are using every leverage at our disposal to make sure this happens. The problem is that I have colleagues who literally are complicit at this point. When people ask me, are there any Republicans that will work with you? I have robust, healthy conversations with many of my Republican colleagues who see what's going on, but I'm at the point where a conversation with me is not enough when you're going on the floor and voting differently. A conversation is not enough. A side conversation is not enough when you're not speaking up and pushing back in committee. So we've used amicus briefs, we filed lawsuits. Members of Congress can't file lawsuits, but in general, we've supported some of the advocacy organizations that have been doing that. And I think finally, one of the things I did this week, and it's very difficult because it puts you in a really precarious position, was I voted no to the budget because I said I'm not funding $1 for ICE. That is also the budget that funds TSA, that funds FEMA. And part of my calculation was we have a secretary who's already not sending out FEMA funds, who's already not following the law, who's already not complying with court orders and subpoenas. So at this point, we have to use the courts as much as we can and really be thoughtful and intentional in the next 8 months about shifting the balance of power. The system is operating the way, I mean, elections have consequences. And we try to amplify it, because what I have seen is that as public sentiment starts to move, the administration does start to change a little bit, but it's gonna be everybody. You started by saying you're one little person, what can you do? We need every one little person to do everything they can to speak up about the things that are important to them. Because otherwise, at this point, I don't know how much we're going to get passed, but if we could just stop the awful that's happening and then live to fight another day, I think that's where we are, but nobody can give up. And I think, and I'll just say one more thing about that, because I'm a history teacher, I'm a student of history, and none of this is new. So if we just read past headlines and lean on our history and talk to our neighbors and our friends, we know how this ends. What is happening right now is what happened with the rise of fascism. What is happening right now is what communities around the country had to deal with during the civil rights movement. And what they did not do was go in a corner and hide. What they did was activate and organize and mobilize and make sure that the courts were on their side and that people knew and understood what was happening and push back until the laws were changed to reflect that. Mike Icabella. Do you want me to read it?
Go ahead.
Why did you sign on to a resolution last year thanking ICE? I'm actually happy that you asked that question, because that resolution it wasn't a resolution thanking ICE. And I've seen over and over this being floated that 75 Democrats voted for a resolution to thank ICE. Do you have the resolution? Actually, I expected that someone would ask this, so I printed the resolution because as a teacher, this is exactly what I would have done in my classroom. This is a three-page resolution. And the last sentence of this resolution says, expresses gratitude to law enforcement, including U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement personnel, for protecting the homeland. That sentence is what is being used as the context of this resolution. That was a resolution of an anti-Semitic attack in Colorado, where a man planned an attack for over a year, showed up at a prayer vigil, and set people on fire with a flamethrower. He said he would do it again, and showed no remorse or regard for these people. When this resolution came through rules, we tried to get that last sentence strict, and the sentence was put in there because in that situation, state, local, and federal law enforcement worked together to find this person and arrest him, which is how it's supposed to work. And we see that not happening right now in Minnesota, where they've blocked out the state and local law enforcement in these investigations. When something like this happens and it's a federal hate crime, they work with all agencies at every level. So when we voted on this back in June, I think it was about one specific incident in Colorado. As your member of Congress, watching the image of a 90-year-old woman who survived the Holocaust being set on fire at a prayer vigil was unconscionable. So I would encourage everybody, and I have copies of this resolution, I'll leave them out on the table. You can take it with you and read it for yourself. But all day, every day, and twice on Sunday, I will condemn that kind of behavior. Anti-Muslim rhetoric is wrong, and anybody who can't call it out. And what is more struggling for me is that there are a group of single-issue voters who are circulating this as if this is the time where we need to be doing this. Read the resolution for yourself. Read it for yourself. I have many copies and I'll leave them out there. Read it for yourself. But also read past the headlines. I feel like, especially here, especially in this community, many people have worked for me, have worked with me, and have worked against me. So you know who I am. I do not change. So I think that anyone who knows me would know that I am someone who would condemn an anti-Semitic attack in this way. And it's unfortunate that that's where we are in this country, but we have to be very careful and conscious of making sure we're reading past the headlines and doing our own research, because otherwise we will be engulfed in mis and disinformation. And that's where we are right now. I just worry that, you know, we talked about this a lot during the campaign and before the election, and there were people who cared about one thing. And I get it, and people are passionate about things, but I am a congressperson for every person in this district. And I think that if people thought about how does this affect the person next to me, how would I think about this, and what would I say, and what would I do, and we all start standing up for each other. I'm the congresswoman who represents a district where there was a mass shooting, and every December I ask my colleagues to observe a moment of silence to help me get legislation passed, because I don't want anyone to have to go through that. So for the representatives who represented Colorado, I stood in solidarity with them as their community was in mourning in that moment. And I guess what concerns me is that there were members who did not vote to condemn this anti-Semitic behavior because they thought they would be attacked for that sentence.
Shame on them.
Yeah. I'm trying to bite my tongue. Because this shit is hard. It's not black and white. You know what I mean? So I had to look at this resolution and say as soon as I say it, I look at a kid. So the core of this resolution was to condemn the anti-Semitic attack in Boulder, Colorado. And Mike, I'm so happy that you answered that question, because I know you know who I am. And for someone who knows me, if you have any question or something that I did or voted on hurt you, I get to know that, so that I can either explain to you or we can have conversations about what this looks like moving forward. But every time I take a vote, trust me, I take it with the information that I think is all the information I have at the time. And if I am wrong, I'm the first to say it. I'm the first to say it. But just like I expected people to stand up for the black community, the Muslim community, the Jewish community, I'm going to do the same. So that's why I voted for that. Maureen, I think. see it first. Maureen. Usually we want to know about the issues impacting Connecticut, but we are very concerned about the state of the nation. Ignoring the Constitution, arresting the press, warrantless abductions of U.S. citizens, masked, anonymous private army, refusal to release the Epstein files for over a month. You are not wrong. So these are all of the things that we are talking about every day. We've had federal judges that have issued orders who have asked for the removal of some of these ICE agents throughout the country, and we have an administration that is actively and willfully ignoring that. One of the things I struggle with is, I have people whose entire retirement job is to criticize me, and they're talking all day, every day. But saying that, people should do this, and I should be able to do what they want, and people should not show up to protest. Those are all constitutional rights. And as your member of Congress, I took an oath to the Constitution, and the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th Amendment make no distinction between a U.S. citizen and a naturalized citizen. Everybody, everybody is entitled to due process. Everybody is entitled to know what they are being detained and arrested for. We have now where all of these companies have spent millions, if not billions of dollars on surveillance technology. They're buying warehouses to house people. All of this flies in the face of the Constitution. I have, first and foremost, signed onto the legislation to impeach Secretary Cristino. I have signed onto the legislation to make sure we resolve past the Dream of Promise Act. We have children who have been in this country their whole lives who are being threatened with, my kids call me. The Oversight Committee keeps going back to the court on the Epstein files because they are in violation of the law. But also, what I'm starting to realize, what seems much more clear to me, all of these things are interconnected. This is about more than one thing, if you ask me. We've seen people in detention centers who have already signed voluntary deportation papers, and instead of being deported back to their country, they're being shipped all around the country to different ICE facilities or private prison facilities because these facilities are making money. We saw in Minnesota where one of the demands in order to get troops out of the city was to turn over voter data. We just saw in Georgia where there was a raid to relitigate the election of 2020. You have to start thinking, how do all of these things work together? You see all of these contractors, and I think probably what I feel is the most egregious, and this is just Johanna theology. The files that were released, the number of high-profile millionaires, billionaires, people who are funding these campaigns, you kind of begin to understand why there's this wall of protection around them. But all that being said, I still think that this government works because I understand that when people make it work, and we have more at our disposal. I'll go back to the 60s, the civil rights movement, than they ever had. We have lawyers who can go to court, who can speak out. So the idea is that we just don't give up. We keep hammering it every day. We force a vote every day. We get them on record. We sign on to legislation. We do all of these things every single day because right now, the strategy is just to wear us down, to make people concede, to make people give up, to make people feel helpless. And that's something that we cannot do. I could not be more proud of the people in Minnesota who are out and marching, standing up, literally while they are under constant attack. But the thing about that is I'm both hopeful and sad. Because it took for this breaking point to happen for people to say, now I've had enough. When on a much smaller scale, we've seen these fractures over and over and over, where the erosion of just basic human rights has happened to people across the street, in our neighborhoods. You know, the number of people that were called in my office during the shutdown saying, it's not the government's responsibility to feed people, why are you fighting so hard for SNAP? In the wealthiest nation in the world, if you don't feel like it's our responsibility to feed children, I would argue that you're part of the problem. That's just me. That's how I feel as a human being and a person. If there's something that I need to spend my tax dollars on, making sure my community is safe and protected is going to be part of it. Kimberly Wigglesworth.
Thank you. It got 1,000 likes, so they're hoping that you would answer it.
This question?
Yep, I already posted it. It's for my paper. I'm the press. And I was expecting you to do to me what Trump has done to people he disagrees on the press, because you guys have done it to me quite a bit.
Well, in case you haven't noticed, Trump and I are not the same.
Well, I'll do all. It's the same question.
You got my attention, and I did answer you.
Nope, that's this.
Because you don't like the answer doesn't mean the question wasn't answered, but I'll read it and answer it again. Connecticut taxpayers continue to see increased funding directed to nonprofit service providers, despite documented cases of missing or misappropriated funds and lack of measurable outcomes. Will you support mandatory independent audits and clawback provisions for federally funded nonprofits when funds are misused or outcomes are not met before approving any additional funds? Yeah, that's an easy one. Yes, I support mandatory audits. Nobody wants federal dollars, local dollars, or any taxpayer dollars to be used inappropriately, because it means that if that is happening, it's being taken from someone else. I want taxpayer dollars to do what they are intended to do. But since this is going to lead me into another question, because like you, I also read some of the comments on social media, I get notifications. The way the federal government works is that we partner with nonprofits all the time, because federal agencies don't have the capacity to service people in all of these areas, whether it's homeless services, whether it is food pantries, whether it is senior centers. It is meeting people where they are and making sure that that network is able to engage. That's what we do. That's what the federal government has always done. If anyone ever misappropriates or misuses those funds, not only should they be prosecuted, but they should be disallowed from ever receiving federal funds again, because it is preventing the people who need that. But I do support working with nonprofits and I'll give you a perfect example. When COVID hit, the state was giving out, we set up through federal funds, they had farm to families food boxes, and they also had vaccinations. The stand-up site was at Regular Field up at UConn. How is a person from Waterbury going to get to Regular Field up at UConn? So, not only did we try to bring those things into communities, but we also tried to work with trusted community partners, which is what people always do. When you see a church that runs a soup kitchen, or a shelter, or a senior center, it's a good chance that they get federal money to do that. That's something that we've always done. I've seen recently on social media disgusting conversations that question the integrity of Grace Baptist Church.
Which church?
Based on a federal grant that they applied for, that they made the case for, to bring a child care center to the city, and they got. This congresswoman is not the one who submitted it. This congresswoman is not a member of that church. But all day long, I support that initiative, and I voted for it when it came before the House. Hasn't even received the funds yet. Because when you get federal funding, you have to go through an environmental impact study, you have to do all of these things to make sure that you fully qualify. But the allegations and the disgusting comments that have been made about the church and the members, as a roundabout attack on me is once again beyond the pale. If someone wants to come for me, you come for me. You want to talk about my legislation or what I voted on, let's talk about that. But to question and demean the integrity of an entire community of people is unconscionable, and it's something that I'm just sick of. I work every day to make sure that I fight for every federal dollar, for every federal initiative to come back and help the people of this community. And I am never not going to stand shoulder square to stand up for the people in this community. And if it means bringing a food pantry, a homeless shelter, a child care center, funding for stay well health, I'm going to do it. But
Hey, Representative Haynes, can I ask you one other question about that? Just one quick,
this is not a back and forth. I can,
because
one of my staff come and make an appointment for her. I told everybody, if you have follow-up questions, we'll absolutely do that, but I want to be respectful of everyone and get to multiple questions.
But it's just a question, it only seems to be for Democrats attacked. Republicans getting attacked, it's okay at these nonprofits, including committing voter fraud, which keeps you in office.
Voter fraud does not keep me in office.
Oh, really? There's sort of,
Every single time. Not just in Waterbury, 41 towns across this district have earned not only the trust but the support of people who show up, whether it's raining, whether it's cold, at elections to volunteer because they believe in the work that I'm doing.
so,
I don't have to lie cheap and cheat to stay here.
so the nonprofits here so the woman who was arrested for committing voter fraud here in Waterbury, who's connected with the nonprofits you don't care about.
Where are you, Ron? Here, Rick. Oh, Rick, do you want me to read it?
Please read.
The question is, an amendment to take, back the $75 billion for ICE was narrowly defeated in the Senate. The $75 billion was to go towards Medicaid. Would you write a similar amendment to the bill when the DHS funding bill comes back to the House? I am signed onto legislation to rescind. What Ron is talking about is when the One Big Beautiful bill was passed, ICE got, the Department of Homeland Security's, I think, got $180 billion, but ICE particularly got $75 billion, which, for context, is enough money to fund that agency for 7 years. Their operating budget is usually about $11 billion a year. This administration gave them $75 billion in one fell swoop. So I am signed on to legislation to rescind that funding because, at the very least, there is no oversight of the agency right now. I also, because of the way this agency has been conducting themselves, and this is new for me because I understand that we need immigration and custom security. Every country needs to secure their border. Every country needs to make sure that we have a full understanding of who is crossing into our homeland. That's why people have to get passports and, oh, I forgot to mention that, I hosted passport days right here in the city of Waterbury. But that's why we do all these things. I believe in border security. I have lost all confidence in this agency to do it, and it should not exist any longer in this current form. An amendment is never going to get passed. So we have a rules committee, and before a bill goes to the floor, you can submit amendments to try to change the text of the bill. I'm not on that committee of jurisdiction, so amendment for me wouldn't be heard, but I already support the legislation, and it will be something that, when we are back in the majority, we try to get that funding rescinded, or in the meantime, force another discharge petition to make it happen. Because every other federal agency, to your point, has to have audits and oversight and accountability on how funds are being used. The fact that there's an expectation that you have $75 billion and you have agents, and I'm going to use the word rogue, who are rogue in this moment, doing whatever they want, refusing to wear body cams, covering up their faces, violating people's rights, doing all of these things, and they think that it's their right to be able to do it. And I'm looking for something because I already know that the statement I just made is going to be twisted into, I don't support law enforcement. I love law enforcement. But also, as your congressperson, I know how to say, yes, I want to be safe, but that doesn't mean you could beat somebody over the head to make that happen. At the same time, and while everyone else is posting slogans and talking about how much they support law enforcement, I've actually done the hard work to bring, look at $3 million for public safety improvements, Danbury, New Fairfield, bringing actual funds, COPS grants back to the cities, helping to improve their technology and their first response systems so that officers have what they need to work. Helping districts to have funding to purchase body cameras so that officers have what they need to do their job effectively. A good cop doesn't want a bad cop standing next to them. And this idea that you can't ask questions, demand accountability, or criticize is just wrong. It's just wrong. Because that's not how our system was supposed to work. So I'm going to keep demanding accountability. And again, this is one of those issues where I really need people to read past the headlines. Because it is remarkable to me that in the same thread where someone says, I don't support the police, they also say, all she does is support the police. She loves the cops. And the same thread where someone says that I am anti-Semitic, they also say that I am pro-Israel. So you can't have it both ways. My votes reflect my values. I do what I think is right, and me voting against something is generally because I need more information, this is not what the people in my district are asking for, or there's something incredibly wrong here that needs to be addressed. So for that funding, I mean, there are so many things in that one big beautiful bill that are beginning to harm people, that people are starting to see. Things that we warned on the front end. When we were talking about Project 2025 and everybody was like, oh, this is crazy, that's not gonna happen. I see some labor folks. One of the first things they did was attack NLRB, try to reverse Davis-Bacon and project labor agreements. All of those things that we fought really hard for. Here in the state of Connecticut, the changes that just happened to SNAP. Veterans are no longer exempt from some of the work requirements. Homeless people are not exempt from the work requirements. The age of a minor child went from 18 to 14. So if you have a 14-year, they're not considered a child under this program. So people who once received benefits, you can only receive benefits for 3 months out of every 36-month period unless you meet all of these work requirements, whether or not there's a job available for you. The mental health provisions, the re-entry provisions that were in this bill hurt our communities. But who does benefit from that bill is the highest income earners, millionaires and billionaires. It made permanent the tax credits that were instituted in 2017 and cut everything else. So taking away from the poorest people to support the wealthiest people in this country, that's what that bill did. And I tried very carefully not to be, I want to just give you the information and you do with it what you will, but some of these things are just so egregious and I don't think people realize, wait, that's me now. Now this affects me. So to your question, there is a bill that I'm signed on to, and one of the things that we want to do is rescind some of these funds, but it was passed. At the same time, where my Republican colleagues cut $187 billion from SNAP, they gave ICE $75 billion. Rachel, is that you? Yeah. Do you want to ask it? She's behind you. Oh my God.
So first, Congresswoman, thank you for holding this.
One second. I don't understand these cards. You put up 45 minutes 5 times. Well, how much time do you have? It's not. It can't be the right
It was 45 minutes, now it's almost 30 minutes.
Oh.
So first, thank you for holding this town hall and doing this in such a difficult time. It broke my heart to hear you describe the changes that you've had to make for safety reasons. And I've talked to so many people who are scared, so many people who are frustrated, and so many people who are angry. What advice do you have for everyone? This is such a hard time for people.
I think my advice in this moment, it is hard. I understand that it's hard, and I never fully appreciated the threats that would happen to my personal safety to do this work. But it's not going to stop me from fighting for people who will never have the ability to be in the rooms where I do this work. As far as me, and I think this is the same answer that I would give to anybody, it's really hard when you're standing alone. It gets a lot easier when you look to your left and you look to your right and there are people around you. There have been times where, as the member of Congress, I bit my tongue because I had a slick mouth, and I know that, and I'm really praying for some discernment. And there are things that I wanted to say that I knew would be bastardized, twisted around, interpreted the wrong way. But I also struggled to understand why no one else was clearing it up. Why no one else was saying, well, that's not true. And I think in this moment, that is what this moment is going to require, for everybody standing up for each other. For everybody saying, well, you know what? I'm a native-born U.S. citizen. My family has been here for decades, but I know this is wrong, and I'm going to stand up for it. I'm straight, and none of this is my issue, but I'm not going to stand here and watch you berate and belittle children because they are gay. People who say, I have a job, I have a home, I have all these things, but I also am not going to let you treat my neighbors and my friends this way. And I think that's what this moment is going to require. I was on a panel the other day, and I talked about, I go back to the civil rights movement because I keep reading over this stuff, and people talk about this as if they were splashes in time. When you talk about the civil rights movement, people talk about Rosa Parks didn't give up her seat. That is true.
She
But
gave
the
it up.
second half of that sentence is, and the boycott lasted for 381 days. Because there was an organizational system. There were members of the community who mobilized. There were people who set bikes and made flyers and repaired shoes and gave people rides. There were funeral directors who used the hearse during the week so that people could get a ride back and forth. Much like we see in Minnesota, where doctors and families are showing up to deliver groceries to people who they know are afraid to go outside. This is going to take a collective action by all of us. Yes, I'm your member of Congress. I represent 750,000 people. And the day after the election, whether those people voted for me or not, I am their congressperson. The very next day.
No, you're not.
I have a responsibility. And I'm not going to be able to do that alone. I have 16 staffers, 8 in Connecticut, 8 in DC. So what it's going to take is for other people to also lean in, for other people to show up, for other people to be literally at board meetings and planning and zoning meetings and local meetings, speaking up for people who are now afraid to go to the podium. That's the moment that we're in. And this idea, anyone who thinks that self-preservation is putting their head down and staying out of the line of fire is coming for you. Eventually it's going to come for you. Because they're running out of people, and I'm not sure what the end game is here. And I can tell you, it's not just about deporting immigrants. There's so much more at play. So people really just have to stand up for the rule of law. Saying, no, you can't arrest journalists. No, you
She did it
can't
to
fire
me.
teachers for having a private opinion.
She did. She harassed
No,
me.
you can't do these
That's why she
things.
took my question.
So for me, that is when my faith is restored, when I feel like I'm by myself and someone calls my office and people say, I don't want to bother you. but you're doing a good job. I got all day for that. Clear my calendar. I got time. I need to hear that. I need to know that I'm not crazy, that I'm not alone. There are times when I go to take these votes and I'm like, is it just me? Why isn't anybody else as upset as I am about cuts to Medicaid, about all of these things? Why isn't anybody else as upset as I am right now? And then I meet people on the streets and I find out actually people are upset. I need everybody to come together and not, it doesn't, protesting is not everybody's ministry. I get that, but do something. We can no longer stay silent in the face of all of this. So it's not, no, I'm not going to say anything back to this person because we have different opinions. You can have a dialogue where people disagree. But the fact that these things are not said allows this void to fester. And I think that's something that I'm learning as I'm in Congress, because there have been many times where I'm like, I'm not even going to give oxygen to that. People are going to know how ridiculous this is, that no one is even going to believe that. But you repeat a lie enough times, you know, and I'm saying this as it's coming in my head, where I have people say, Johanna Hayes was in Martha's Vineyard when we had a flood. You're not going to believe your lying eyes when you saw Johanna Hayes and the entire Connecticut delegation, the governor, the lieutenant governor, every constitutional, all 5 congresspeople, and both senators in Chicago at the convention when we had already flown out. I did the Connecticut roll call. But I said, no one's going to believe that because it's so ridiculous. And now, years later, I still hear the same lies being repeated. So what is it going to take in this moment for people to get checked on site in real time? On site. That's what's going to have to happen. And it can't be the same people all the time. Athena tired. Like, everybody has to do that. And I know that this is a moment where people are like, well, I've never done this before. It's uncomfortable, but it's going to get more uncomfortable if we don't stop this from happening. Lisa, can you speak on the current I'm sorry, Lisa, did you want to ask your own question?
Actually, I would like to just say something instead of the question.
Oh.
We're talking about doing something, and as you have pointed out, not all of us feel comfortable going to a rally or speaking out when we should become more able to fact check people in the moment. What I'd love to suggest is that every night at 8 p.m., open up your front doors and ring a bell. Let freedom ring.
Whatever works for you. I appreciate that, Lisa, but the thing is, people need to feel like they're doing something. And everybody's going to, what that means and what that looks like for different people is going to be very different. I've seen people show up to volunteer, people, you know, more people joining prayer calls in the morning, people writing letters to the editor, people just doing whatever they can. You have to figure out what feels right for you, but I can almost assure you that if you do nothing in this moment, you will regret that at some point. Because it just feels wrong. And I think that I have just a different level of both appreciation and humility for that. Because as a history teacher, I study history. I probably am more in depth on different periods in history where it seemed like we were moving backwards and civil rights were under attack. But I also know that the only way that I'm able to stand before you as the first Black Congresswoman to ever represent the state of Connecticut in Congress is because of something someone else did before me. The obligation that goes with that is not lost on me. It's not lost on me, and attacking me personally, my integrity, my character, my looks, is not going to change that, because I'm still going to keep working that much harder for someone else behind me. I'm still gonna keep doing that. What you see before you is evidence of answered prayers, evidence of different choices, evidence of making mistakes and standing back up. And I know that there's a whole lot of people who don't have a podium, who don't have a room full of people who are in that journey right now, and they just need someone to say, I'm fighting for you in this moment. And I'm gonna keep doing that. And like I said, that's gonna look different for a lot of people. There are people here who I know have never been to a town hall before. But today, this is different. This moment is different. So whatever you need to do, but pay attention. But pay attention, and at the very least, vote. Make informed decisions and vote. Okay. Teacher burnout is driving people out faster than we can replace them. What is one concrete change at the federal level that could improve teacher retention? That's Ben from Thomaston. You know I know about this one. So, like I said, I introduced legislation, Safe Education Jobs Act, which was included and passed into law. Improving the teacher pipeline is something that we have to do, making sure that people want to teach. And that involves making sure districts like Waterbury, Title I school districts, get federal funding to support all of their efforts. Making sure that IDEA, which is the federal law that mandates that our students, our special education students, get the appropriate accommodations, is funded and parents can depend on that it's fully paid. The Department of Education right now is under attack. One of the things that this administration did was change the student loan funding formulas, which reclassified many professional jobs, made it so that students could not get graduate student loans for college, made it so that many of the people who were getting education loan forgiveness were now no longer eligible, and that debt is back on their credit. In the state of Connecticut, you need a master's degree to be a teacher. It costs more to become a teacher than most people sign for their first contract. And what that's going to do is make it so that cities like Waterbury can't afford to retain all of these teachers. Our special education certified teachers, behavior therapists, audiologists, sign language interpreters, all of those things that these kids are required to have by law. Required to have by law. And right now I'm fighting with this administration tooth and nail because we have a Secretary of Education who, first of all, doesn't believe in public education, wants to support full voucher programs and privatize so that students, in essence, get a coupon to go to a private school, $7,000. The per pupil expenditure in most districts is about $20,000 by the time you calculate all of their needs. Making sure the pipeline and the certification and the teacher preparation pipeline is intact so that high-quality teachers who are prepared to do the work, do it, and are not overwhelmed when they get their first year in a school district. But also making it so a kid like me from a city like this can go off to college and then come back to work in this city. After I was named National Teacher of the Year, the number of job offers I got all around the state for a better position. And I was like, well, you don't understand, I work here on purpose. I want to be here. And that's what we need, people who want to be in front of our kids and don't feel demonized and dehumanized, and like all of these things are their responsibility. But that being said, we also have to acknowledge that successful student outcomes is not just what happens when the bell rings and the door closes. It's making sure that kids have a roof over their head and a full belly and don't have to worry about violence, seeing somebody get shot outside their window, that they're not transient and moving all over the place, that they have what they need so that when that door closes, the only thing they have to think about is learning. And that the person in front of them believes in them more than they believe in themselves and say, no matter what you want to do, I'm going to help make sure you're prepared to do that. You can't do that. Like I told you, my staff called you back because it starts at the top. When you have from the top saying we don't believe in public education, that's part of the problem. So again, this is one of those things, elections have consequences, and that answer could be the same for any one of our federal agencies right now. This is probably the most unqualified group of secretaries that holding them accountable, because they see the same things we see. They hear the same things we hear. You know, the fact that, I believe it was in Fairfield, the fact that Fairfield uninvited the Secretary of Education. When you look at it and you're being disinvited, like, people are starting to pay attention, and that's what we have to just not lose focus at all. All right, I know we're wrapping up on time, and it looks like I might be able to get through these. I'll read two and I'll do two at a time, and then, okay. In our districts, prices have gone up dramatically for everything, specifically housing, food, and electricity. What measures can Congress take to lower costs, and what can you fix? Affordability is a big thing. It's one of the things that the president said he would address on day one that we have not seen. And some of the challenges to that are some of the legislation that has been passed. People call my office all the time asking about electricity rates and what can we do. That actually is a state issue, but at the federal level, literally in the Inflation Reduction Act, we allocated billions of dollars for clean energy to reinforce the grid, for wind projects, for all of these things that over time would have reduced electricity rates, saved, I think it was about $500 million a year for Connecticut residents, and the project was 80% done, and this president stopped it. He stopped it because he doesn't believe in clean energy. Everybody should know, no matter who you are, there are just some basic things that we can do to bring down these costs. When you look at housing, there are some basic things that we can do. I know that there had been some, again, a state issue, but there are federal things that we can do, the regulations, the matching grants, supported projects that people can do. I was just in Salisbury yesterday where I got the money for affordable housing in Salisbury, which people don't think because it's a high-income community, but as you know, everybody in the community isn't high income. Where if you have a community where a volunteer firefighter or a teacher or someone who works at can't afford to live in town, that's what happens across much of my district. I was very pleased to see that the governor has made some commitments to housing in the state of Connecticut, and he's working with many of the small towns who resisted it, because everybody talks about the high cost of housing and how we need to stop commercial landlords from coming in and buying up all these properties. But then when in some of my smaller towns, people are like, oh no, but not here. Like, we need affordable housing, but not here. And we really, again, it goes back to one of my earlier answers. We have to think, what does this mean for everybody? When we're looking at some of our regional school districts who are saying enrollment is down and we don't have as many young families moving in because no one can afford to live in many of these places. But I say all that, I hate the word but, and Connecticut is one of the wealthiest and the healthiest states. We make some conscious choices to take care of our people. I hear a lot of people who work in Connecticut and then they move to a state like Florida, and then as soon as something happens, they have to come back here to seek health care. They have to come back here, you know, they're retiring off of their Connecticut pension. We invest in our people on the front end. And that's something that I'm always going to fight to make sure that we do. Fight to make sure that people get the pensions that they deserve. All of these things, but we also have to bring down these prices. There are so many things that we can do. When you talk about affordability, the price of groceries, those tariffs did not help. Tariffs are paid by the American people. No matter how that's spun, they did not help. The farmers were hurt by those tariffs. So calling it out, you know, every time, I have a lot of sleepless nights, but I also don't. I wait a minute and try to play things out, because the president will make all these announcements and sign all these executive orders, and then it fizzles. There's no follow-up, there's no action. So just making sure these things are done. You know, in the state of Connecticut, after the Affordable Care Act subsidies expired, the governor said he's going to put about $100 million in to at least try to ease the pressure. We have a healthy rainy day fund here in the state of Connecticut, and it is pouring rain. But the governor can't fund all of these projects, can't fund everything. So my long and short-term goals are making sure we get in the majority in the House in November. To make it stop. But, you know, if I would remind everybody, people need to stop grading on a curve. So the same purity test that were applied last November where people were talking about the price of eggs and all of these things, I hope people remember those things moving forward. Because this administration hasn't done anything that they promised they were going to do. At last year's town hall, oh, Michael, do you want to read it yourself, or you want me to read it? You remember what it said?
I do.
Okay,
I'll stand up so you can.
go ahead.
Thank you.
Give a microphone to you.
Microphone. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking with all of us, with me again. And yes, I start off by referencing your town hall 8 months ago. I'm Michael from Kent. Thanks. I'm amending my question because of how you started today, and it's great to hear you addressing ICE, the Epstein files, boycotts, to know you're so active. We're on the same page and we think many different states. I suspect many people here today are here because of the situation in the country, the recent events with ICE, etc. But your whole opening was about your accomplishments. They're great. I'm a teacher and I've been a bit of a writer, and I feel that you're very believable. Most people know what that means. I'm not the representative, but if I was talking about, especially education, rather than the Chromebooks, I would have started by saying they've gutted the Department of Education. I would start by letting people know your position on ICE, what you can do about it, that we all need to be together. And I would wish to see more of an active stance. You could put it on your website, it could be the weekly wraps. I do see many more articles about police than I've ever seen about taking a stand on ICE or featuring your co-signing onto the amendment about Kristen Dunn. So I know it sounds like you're proud to say you haven't changed and you won't change, but the times have changed. You're a student of history. The country's really changed. A lot of us are worried about the election. I brought a printout of the Times editorial, which is on the top of our editorial page right now, that indeed the 2026 election is at risk. So I'm just asking, you're a teacher, why not change things up? Why not be the cheerleader when you're asking why don't we see people doing more of what we do? I feel like we need more people like Chris Murphy's and others that are on TV all the time, really sending a signal to their constituents. I know you know it, your heart's in the right place, but it seems so polite and I think we need something different in this era.
Well, I appreciate that, and I remember this question from the town hall in Kent. And at last year's town hall, you asked me, I asked you to more urgently reflect our political situation, and you said it was not your style. I remember that conversation. But the question wasn't just about more urgently reflecting the political situation. The question was, why am I not more like, and you rattled off a list of names, AOC, Jasmine Crawford, because I'm Johanna Hayes. I'm not Chris Murphy. I'm not any of more than my heart is in the right place. I delivered for this district. I voted on it. So it was not a list of accomplishments, if you will. It was me updating my constituents on this is what I've done for you. And I would argue that that is more beneficial to the people in this room than a tweet, than a statement, than putting out these things.
Yeah.
All of this, every vote I take is on my website. We send out a weekly wrap. So I'm not burying the lead, I'm not hiding the information. The information is there. But there is, at the risk of, I'm going to go back to what I know. if I could get this done, because I know that the list of people that you referenced at that town hall could never win a district like Connecticut's 5th Congressional District. And if I'm not in office, I can't do anything for the people of this district.
That's right.
If I'm not here, I can't even begin the conversation. I can't force the vote. I can't put my card in the machine to vote. So no, I'm not going to live tweet from my kitchen or my bathroom and give these long dialogues and colloquies with people. I listen to people. I collect all the information and the facts on what my constituents need for me to do. And then I go to Washington and I conduct myself accordingly. And the fact that, and it's interesting because one of the things I had to do as the representative for this district was, first of all, teach people how to treat me. If I had done any of the things that you suggested I do as a representative for this district, I would have been an angry black woman who didn't know how to connect with the people of the city. In the last 8 years was help people understand that I can show you better than I can tell you. I can show you better. And the fact that I have been able to do these things, I have been able to, I can attack both ways, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. People said I wanted to defund the police and I hadn't opened my mouth about this. So I can't operate from a place of putting my finger up and seeing where the temperature is, or what people want me to say or do. I do what I think is right, I vote based on the issues, and I have never shied away from the hard things. So respectfully, your assessment I would have to disagree with because it's not accurate or appropriate. I do respect All right, I'll do 2 more. I can't do this. Oh, seriously? Sorry. Take it. Danny. Is that you? Yeah. I know personally that my school is lacking in substitutes, but how can I help? How can you help? How can I help increase teacher staffing? Wow. One of the hardest jobs in a building is to be a substitute teacher. Because kids think that's the day where they can do whatever they want. So what can you do personally? Just behave as if your teacher were there. And turn to your friends and say, come on guys, let's just do our work. It's really hard to show up with a group of kids who are set in their ways and they're used to their teacher, and you're the new person and they think it's a play day. The learning doesn't stop. It should continue, but I appreciate how you didn't ask what I could do. You said, what could you do? And that's just a very little thing that you can do. You know, and even if you choose not to do your work, just sit quietly. Just sit, have a secret play day. But don't give, I mean, it's really hard to, first of all, recruit people to do these positions. These are people who are retired or in school, or most of the time have multiple other jobs, and they want to be in a classroom with kids. So for what you can do for your part, just show up and behave. You're here to learn. From Charlene, freeze DHS, and why did they fire the OPM employees that help seniors? Seniors are forced to go online and do all business, especially 1099-R forms. That was one of the things that we voted for, not for this, but when Biden was in office, one of the things that we voted for was to increase the federal staff, for instance, at the IRS. Not to go after people, but so that people who had issues, they could be resolved quickly. And one of the first things that this administration did was come in and get rid of all of those people, and they're saying that we can expect longer wait times in this tax season. Everybody is required to pay federal income taxes. You should at least not have to wait online for hours in order to get a response. At the point where someone reaches out to my office, they've already tried everything. You know, they're getting letters saying that they're delinquent, all of these things, and they're like, I just need to talk to someone on the phone. I can figure this out very quickly. This administration cut all of those staffers. And I caution people who are saying they want smaller federal government, and I understand that from a conservative perspective, but if these are the people tapped, less people means less people to respond to people's needs. Less people means less people to schedule appointments at the VA. Less people means less people at the Social Security Administration. So people have to do a cost benefits analysis and say, what government services do I think are worth preserving? And I would argue that the services that help to solve problems for people are things that we should be investing in. When DOGE made all of those cuts across different agencies and organizations, they had to call people back, they had to scramble to get things done. The number of complaints at the Office of Civil Rights has gone unresolved because they let go of all of these people with no concrete plan for what that looks like. And these are all of the things that are an issue right now. When I was, that's a different question. But restoring these people, what the question was about OPM, restoring these people in federal jobs who literally were public servants. You know, one of the things we have to do, I talked briefly about labor, but restoring that Schedule F, where you have career civil servants who worked for 30 years and they were told, we're done. You know, people generally take these jobs because they want to help people. You know, and yes, they're public jobs, but you have staff who get people yelling at them on the phone, who are unhappy with the results, unhappy with the answer, and they still keep showing up and trying. So those jobs need to be protected as well, so that those people can help the people that we're tasked with serving. No name. Why isn't the Democratic Party using all levers available to press or stop this insanity? What are the Dems planning? I don't know who you are, but I imagine you're still here. But
it was me. And actually, you have dealt with some of those things already. So
well, no, but the thing is, I would tend to agree with you because I have, if you saw, I've been doing, if anyone, I know people don't religiously watch C-SPAN, but I've been doing, this is separate from the answer, but I'm not happy with the response to education, so I've been doing special order hours, getting members together. I've been sending letters. I've been introducing legislation. It's different when you're in the legislative, not the executive branch. In Congress, I have to get 218 people to agree with me to pass anything. I have to get the speaker to agree to put it on the floor. So it's a big deal to move something. But what you can do is raise awareness. And I was very upset within my Democratic caucus when, bless you, for as important as Affordable Care Act subsidies were and the insurance issue, everything is burning. We have this talented caucus with all of these people from all of these dynamic backgrounds. We should be firing on all levers, talking about every single one of these issues. The American people are smart and savvy enough to deal with more than one issue at a time. And the problem is, when you wait, before you can even regroup, something else has happened. And I'll tell you a good example of that. 2 weeks ago, when we read about the shooting of Renee Good in Minnesota, I, as has been my just position as a person, I like to listen first. So my staff has called me, did you see this? I'm like, yeah. And I said, do you want to put out a statement? No, I want to make sure we have all the information. Let's see what happened. So I'm collecting all this information. Within an hour, the Vice President, the DHS Secretary, Stephen Miller, all came out trying to change the narrative, call her a domestic terrorist, tell you don't believe your lying eyes, and say this is not what happened. So to your point, we are operating in very different times. So in the space of not even 2 weeks, when a second and then a third person was shot and ultimately killed, before they could even get to the mic with, and they still didn't. He was a domestic terrorist, he was attacking police, he was aggressive, he was doing all these things. I came out with the statement, this has to stop. And the response was, why aren't you waiting for all the facts? Why are you That was the response. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But what I learned from that first one is that people understanding, no, this is not okay, and people speaking up, and pushback coming, you already have me. But what it did was move some of my other colleagues who are unwilling to move. What it did was move people right over the border in New York who literally have been towing the line for this agency, and now they've also been put on notice that we will not be sending you back to Congress if this is what you decide to do over and over again. So my position, I am moving in a way that I probably wouldn't have before, just because I understand the urgency of this moment and the times that we are in. But I also understand that we don't win these battles in spurts, in one-offs. It is a slow grind. It is showing up every day. It is doing the hard work all the time. I didn't go to Congress for celebrity status, to try to be, an influencer, one of these personalities. I went to Congress to get the hard things done for the people that I represent.
If I can, you are right. I love everything you're doing. Trump's megaphone has always been outside.
Yeah.
The Dems are not fighting back on that. You coming out and saying something right away. And even if it's got to stop, I will get back to you when the facts are in. Don't take
She was
anybody
asked
word for
questions
it.
back and forth.
Right? We need to speak out loud, proud, and faster than what has been done for years. 'Cause
I
we're not
agree with you.
moving.
I agree with you. And I'm going to wrap up now because it's Saturday at City Hall and they're going to kick us out. So there's 3 other questions. I will reach out to these people individually. But I'll close by just saying, even though this was not, I'm gonna finish where you finished. Because you said the Dems have to speak out, the Dems have to do these things. Again, the day after the election, I became a congressperson for everybody.
Not
Doesn't
true.
change my value set, doesn't change my position, but
Not
I know
true.
what I have to do. I actually had a gentleman who that's a different story. But I say that because when you say the Dems have to do, I guess what I would follow up with to everybody in this room, whether you are a Democrat or Republican and independent, I'm not the only Dem here. So all of the Democrats, all of the people who think this is wrong, everybody has to speak up. And I say this because, and I'll go back to literally, last year, none of this is new. This president is doing everything he promised he would do. This president is fulfilling all of his campaign promises. And I don't think anyone could have anticipated the hurt and harm, except for lower prices. Anyone could have anticipated the hurt or harm that would come to our communities. So when we were, once again, the Dems, having these purity test conversations about what level of good we were, the fact that we couldn't come together and say, no matter how imperfect you think somebody is, all day long, she is going to be better than you. Even after that happened, even living in this reality that we're living in, I still have people who call me about the placement of a comma on a press release. So we have to do this together. If we are upset about the destruction of the Department of Education, then we have to do this together. If we are upset about the erosion of labor rights, then we have to do this together. If we are upset about literally the economy, all of these agencies, Homeland Security, DHS, Because what cannot happen is at the end of this journey, people show up and they're like, wow, I like these 9 things, but that one time when you weren't at the parade, was it all bets are off now? Too much is at stake here. Too much is at stake. Too much is happening. Our democracy, people said people don't understand, big terms like, people understand that. People know what that means. People know what that means. The price of eggs isn't going to matter if literally we go back to a time where you can discriminate against people on the job, discriminate against people in housing, people's rights can be violated. None of that is going to matter. So it's going to take all of us. So again, I thank you. It's a very cold day. It's early on a Saturday. I appreciate the opportunity to update you in a way that I haven't before. And like I said at the top, I was very intentional about wanting to list my accomplishments, or list what I delivered for this city in particular, because it's a question that comes up every day. So I would hope that the next time that question is asked, even if you don't remember all these things, you can direct someone to my website. Or you can say, oh no, I kind of remember something, at least one thing, pick one. So that when someone says she hasn't done nothing, oh, she reached out to the pool. There's a whole lot of things. And this idea, I guess, again, me thinking that just put your head down and do the work, and people will just know what you did, yes, that is important, but you feeling like I'm working hard for you in Washington is equally as important. And if I need to remind you of that, or share that with you, or say it over and over and over again, it's something that I'm willing to do. So thank you so much for coming